cancel culture might be the best thing to ever happen for free speech. Now, hear me out. There's been a crazy upswing in what is known as cancel culture, where people can basically they lose their jobs, they lose their platform, they get canceled from social media, they get all kinds of things because of some sort of thing that they said or did. Usually some past statement, usually that's perceived to be sexist or racist or something like that. And then, boom, they just lose their jobs. Now, of course, this kind of idea came from a sort of people's street justice idea that there are some people who are in positions of power, and because of those positions of power, they are immune to justice. They can do all kinds of bad things and get away with them. And this idea of canceling them is through popular demand, force the issue among employers, among institutions, among things like that, that otherwise would have protected them, but now feel the pressure and now have to get rid of a bad actor. And now, of course, this has gone to absolutely ridiculous levels today with people being canceled for all kinds of crazy reasons, especially for falling outside the mainstream accepted sort of philosophy, which, I would argue is not mainstream in the slightest. It's actually pretty fringe and rare, but the main left-leaning Twitter mob sort of consensus. If you go against that, you can get canceled. And the harder you go against that, the quicker and more violently you get canceled. Now, how on earth is this a good thing for free speech? Well, it isn't. Short term, it isn't. Short term, it involves a lot of canceling people, a lot of censorship, a lot of people who should have nice, normal livelihoods that either said something mildly or did something mildly bad, or not bad at all, just outside of the Twitter mob consensus. And they're losing a voice, and we all suffer from the lack of diverse voices and opinions out there. But every time you cancel someone from the major platforms, you do two things. The first thing, and the most important thing, is you move them over into a bucket of platforms that can't really be censored. Sometimes you move them from one censorable platform to another censorable platform, but sometimes you get it right and you actually move them to something decentralized, like say library, where you might be even watching this video, to be honest, where they can't take down the video and they can't demonetize you. And that on a whole is great because there have been small bits of censorship and cancellation for ever since there have been platforms. They just have kind of gone unnoticed because there were more extreme cases, or there were more fringe cases or whatever. But now that it's happening more mainstream, now you have people going towards platforms that won't be able to do this sort of thing, and you won't have these untold stories of censorship at all. But the second thing that I'm actually more excited about is when you're excluding people from the big group of consensus, when you're excluding people from the largest platforms, you are actually moving them into an exclusion bucket. They are now included with the other excluded. And when you are included with the excluded, now you have a sort of camaraderie amongst the other canceled people. Now, of course, in the beginning, you might have, say, a bunch of racists and supremacists and violence advocators and just fringe conspiracy theorists, or just strange people that are kind of not favorably viewed by most of society. But then you start to have more mainstream right-leaning voices and things like that, and now you're starting to get a lot of left-leaning voices. The political divide in the world, but particularly in the US, is not very beneficial, to where you have a polarizing two sides of people that are just separated based on a camp that narrowly pushes them across one side or the other, depending on what they believe. But now they have to buy a whole ideology, and then they have to completely reject a whole other one, and they have to hate those people on these sides and love the people on this side. But when you're starting to be thrown into a bucket with a bunch of people you don't agree with, first off, you might find some common ground for agreement on a lot of things. But also, you might realize that a lot of the people that you used to talk about, used to hate, you used to think were just wrong and bad for stuff, you might still think some of those things, but you might also realize that they're just human beings like you who have voices that should be heard whether or not you agree with them, and that we can probably learn more from each other by all speaking freely and respecting our right to have an opinion, even if not the opinion itself. And so I think that not only can censorship bring people to decentralized platforms, but it can actually bring the censored together and really break down a lot of boundaries between people that have been dividing this country and the world for quite some time. I'm not going to say long live cancel culture, but it might have a silver lining there.